So, thanks for joining us here on thevj.com and also on 2 Facebook pages, or maybe 3, depending on how well I did with the sharing. Today we're going to be talking about how to start and run your own TV channel. This is really a revolution in terms of technology and in terms of the industry, and I think it's an important thing that we pay attention to. We'll be taking questions here, and if you have any questions, you can find us at...
You can comment. You can also email us at contact@thevj.com.
Contact@thevj.com. You can comment. You can ask questions. You can also probably put them here on Facebook, and I'll find them. So I'm happy to answer as many as you can. Essentially, what we're looking at here is an entire revolution in the television business. The whole term television is kind of an abstraction. It's not so many years ago to say television meant like HGTV or NBC or something like that, which is what the technology allowed. But today when I say television here on in, I'm really referring to television on your phone, video on your computer, video on your tablet, or stuff that comes in through that giant thing that's hanging on the wall in your living room. It's all become the same thing. When television was invented and surfaced in this country in the 1940s and the 1950s, it was an incredibly expensive thing to do. You needed studios, you needed cameras, and more than that, you needed an FCC license to broadcast through the air. So as a result, there were only 3 networks, which is all the spectrum could allow, and a couple of local TV stations. It is an incredibly powerful medium. We were just flying back from Miami yesterday, and I picked up a copy of Wired, and the reason I picked it up was the cover story was about the changing nature of news, and as it turns out, television is still pretty much the #1 medium for communicating with people, even people 18 years old or younger. They still watch television. Also, television is the driver of the stuff that ends up on the internet, which is more like an echo chamber for what television, particularly with news, starts with. Now, not so long ago, if you wanted to have a television network, and I've built about a dozen of these things, it was extremely expensive. You were in the hundreds of millions, if not billion-dollar category, if you wanted to own a cable channel or start a broadcast channel. And we've built these things all over the world. And the first thing we ask clients is, do you have $500 million you want to blow on this thing? Otherwise, we're wasting our time. 2 revolutions happened simultaneously. One, of course, the internet now broadcasts or webcasts video live, which is exactly what we're doing now. It doesn't cost anything, and anyone can do it. Just like I'm doing it, you can do it, anyone can do it. The second thing is that the ability to make content, which used to be limited to a couple of professional production companies or guys with giant cameras and $1-million edit suites, is now available to anyone who has a smartphone or an iPhone, because those things shoot, and the newest shoot in 4K, they edit, they put in graphics, they put in music, and they broadcast and transmit. In fact, now we're broadcasting right now on, well, half of this is going to Facebook on the iPhone, and the other half is going, what are we using now?
We're going to thevj.com.
Thevj.com, and what technology are we using for that?
The Dogcast Wirecast.
Wirecast. So there you go. And of course, this stuff is free, right? It doesn't cost us anything. Wirecast we paid, but not very much. It's virtually free. Considering how many people you get in front of, it doesn't cost anything. So now the question becomes, since the technology exists, what do you do with it? Most of this problem is psychological. The psychological problem is that we've all grown up in an environment where we consider that television content essentially comes from MSNBC or ABC or NBC or the HGTV or the Learning Channel or whoever, and then our job is to sit passively and watch it. So the content starts here, it's made by a very few people, and it goes out to, it's what's called broadcasting, goes out to everyone, and our job as citizens is to watch, and occasionally maybe we go on the internet and we say we don't like this, and did you see Rachel Maddow and all kinds of crap like that. But this unbelievably powerful medium. Remember, the average American spends 5 hours a day, every day, watching television, and 8.5 hours a day, every day, on these stupid screens that we're on now, more and more of which is video. So it's not a question of who watches it, it's a question of who puts stuff into the system. And up until now, the only people who put stuff into the system were television networks or cable channels and people like that. This has been blown away. You now have the opportunity to put whatever you want into the system. Effectively, you can start your own television channel. Why would you want to do that? This is the most important point I want to make during this discussion. The reason you want to move that is so it generates revenue. I mean, you may want to do it like YouTube so that just your friends, you can show it to your friends and relatives, but there's a whole opportunity here for a whole new industry, and that's the quantum shift that the television industry is undergoing at this moment, even as we speak. Prior to this revolution in technology and the internet, all content was made by a couple of networks. And those networks didn't care what they put on the air. The purpose of putting the programming on the air was to sell advertising time, so that's how they generated their money. So they put some show up, and then they would sell, essentially lease, 30-second swaths of that show, up to 8 minutes every half hour, to anybody who wanted to pay money so they could put their ads into the slot. And the idea of an ad was that you watch the commercial, which kind of slipped to you while you were watching some sporting event or something else, and then it would motivate you to get in the car and drive to the store and buy the product and then come home. This is, in a world of internet, insane. And I don't know if you saw the news this morning, both Kmart and Sears are basically going out of business because the whole notion of having a store with physical stuff is going away because of the internet. So the internet does another thing besides show video. It sells things. But nobody has put these two factors together. No one has combined the entertainment side and the sales side, which is kind of crazy. But of course, it takes a long time for the architecture to catch up with the technology, which generally precedes it. So this idea of let's entertain people or inform people and amuse people over here in this corner, and then we'll slip in some ads in here, and that will pay for this, and the ads will encourage you to someplace else, is stupid. It's archaic. It's from the 1980s or the 1990s. If you own a business or you work in a company and that company sells things, which pretty much everybody does, then the point of sale, really the best point of sale, is online. And I think Jeff Bezos at Amazon has demonstrated that this clearly works. People buy stuff online. What brings people online is entertainment. That's why people go to the movies. That's why people watch television. So the whole notion of bifurcating the online industry to say, over here we'll have Amazon, which sells things, and over here we'll have HGTV online, which allows you to watch shows, is a function of broadcast world, which is dead. In the online world, you can combine these two functions of advertising and entertainment and put them together. So if you have, for example, one of our friends and longtime colleagues does Let's Fly Away, which is music from Tennessee and Kentucky and stuff like that. They're a very successful business, and they sell their stuff online. But what they should do is they should have their performances and the sales of their music and T-shirts and hats and books in the same space. This is a radical change in how we arrange and organize the television and entertainment business. Up until now, production companies or cable channels have been agnostic in terms of product. That is, they didn't really care what it was they were putting on the air. NBC really doesn't give a crap what the show is as long as the show rates. There's no emotional connection between the people at NBC and the programs that they put on the air. There's no emotional connection between the people at the Travel Channel and the programs they put on the air. They'll put on whatever anybody wants to see. In the world of writing and print, which has now been democratized for about 500 years, there's a direct emotional connection between the people who create the content and what the people are promulgating or selling. In other words, you write something because you care about it and you want to promote that thing. It's a personal thing. You don't hire a production company to write your book unless you hire a ghostwriter, and we won't get into that issue at the moment. But for the most part, people who write and publish do it out of a personal passion. The Wheelers, Tony and Maureen Wheeler, who started Lonely Planet, for example, they actually made those trips themselves and they wrote the books themselves, and that's why the thing was so successful, because they had personal passion. If they were doing it today, they'd probably have a video camera and they would put it on video, and then they would use the site not only to show the video, but to sell the books. Do you see how everything binds together so nicely? So the technology now is here so that anyone can launch their own network. To call it a network is kind of fallacious because it's not really a network. It's an online living video site. It uses the technology of video to A, sell an idea, and marry that to sell a product, because if you don't have revenue attached to it, you're either having a good time or you're wasting your time. Well, how do you do this? So here, let me promote my own product. At thevj.com, which is a website I definitely think you should go and take a look at, we have more than 600 instructional lessons that will teach you how to make quality pieces, how to make compelling pieces, how to start your own business, how to run your business, how to manage it, the legal stuff, the music rights, all that stuff self-contained. There's no point in you going to do that unless you take it to the next step, and that is to create your own content. And the whole purpose of creating your own content is ultimately to drive revenue. And the revenue that you're going to drive, whether you own a pizzeria or a clothing store or in the travel business or in the marketing business or you're selling cars, it doesn't really matter what your product is. Video is the sine qua non of holding people's attention and communicating ideas to them. And that's what this medium is really all about. So the barrier to entry, which used to exist since the invention of television, there was a massive barrier to entry. Cameras were big and expensive. They were complicated to use. It was kind of a dark art as to how you made this stuff. It's the reason production companies could charge hundreds of thousands of dollars for doing essentially what I'm doing now, which is simply getting in front of a camera and doing my thing, or taking the camera out in the field and making little stories, but the little stories have to have a purpose. So I think that as we talk about this notion of starting your own television network and broadcasting your own television network, it's not just to create content that is entertaining. Certainly the content has to be entertaining, but the real purpose here is to marry it to a revenue stream. And that revenue stream is not bifurcated, it's split 1,000,000 times over. The same thing that happened with the rise of print 500 years ago. Before the printing press was invented, the whole world of print existed in the hands essentially of the church, and they hand-wrote books and stuff like that. The advent of the printing press unleashed the ability of anyone to publish anything they wanted to do. And immediately the only ones who made a success at this were people who published things that people wanted to read. And of course, as newspapers came along, they began to marry this notion of content and advertising comes together. That's what made such powerhouses out of the press until the internet came along and eviscerated the power. See, Anthony Aristar, you say, I want one too. Well, I want one too also. So the fact is that the power of the internet drives the content of video into 3 or 4 billion homes, and it doesn't cost anything to do. What you have to do, though, is you have to create content that people want to look at. This, of course, is what the website is for. Once you've created content people want to look at, it has to have a purpose beyond simply entertaining people. And the notion of just advertising stuff is, in my opinion, it's a crazy thing to do. So instead, the idea is to create video that marries to transactions, online transactions. This is very easy to do, and I think this is where the industry is headed. Do we have questions?
I have a question. If
Very
you want
good.
to take one now.
Yes, certainly.
Our friend Len, we know Len Clark.
Oh, Len, how are you? Nice to see you. Len took one of our 4-day boot camps,
Yeah,
right?
and a member of the same.
And a member at the
He
same
wants to
time.
know how to get advertisers and your content to ad agencies. If you have a station, how do you get someone to advertise what you're doing?
Right. I think the thing to do with these things is as we go from 3 networks to 500 cable channels to ultimately 1,000,000 channels, which is what we have now, I think that we get, as the number of channels expands, the focus of the channels narrows. This is a very important point. When broadcast first started with networks, of course, NBC did everything. They did sports, they did entertainment, they did game shows, they did travel, they did everything you could think of because that's all there was. When the 500 channels of cable came along, they began to specialize. You got travel channel, you got food channel, you got cooking channel, and stuff like that. As we go from 500 channels to essentially 5,000,000 channels, the specialization will ultimately narrow down even further. So you'll have essentially the Chinese food channel, the Japanese food channel, the Spanish food channel. As you narrow the spectrum of your interest, you also focus much more in on potential advertisers. So if I sell Chinese food cookbooks, as an example, I might take an ad on NBC, but it would cost me a fortune, and maybe 0.00001% of the viewers actually have any interest in what I'm doing. But if you create the Chinese food channel, and then I sell Chinese food cookbooks, first, my cost of advertising is going to drop. And secondly, you're going to be able to tell me that virtually everybody who's on my channel is interested in the one thing that I'm selling. And this is true if you're a car salesman, or you have a pizzeria, or you're in the clothing business, or whatever it is. The more you narrow the focus of the content, the more you, ironically and conversely, expand the number of potential advertisers, because you can go to the advertiser and say, look, we're going to sell this to exactly almost a 1-to-1 ratio. Everybody who watches our channel is interested in the thing that we do. You open up a pet dog channel, it's a huge market, dog food, dog training, dog hotels, whatever it is, but the only people who are going to come to it are people who are interested in the thing that you're selling. So really, it's a logical win-win. Yes.
Ready for another one?
Ready.
Our friend Ed. Ed has a question.
Oh, Ed, hi.
He goes, I've already got a fully formed show for myself using Periscope.
Right.
Do you like other venues beyond Periscope
Yes.
for live?
I hate Periscope. Who watches Periscope? Nothing personal, Ed. I'm sure Periscope is lovely, and when it came out, it was very interesting.
He says, I would like to drive viewership via Instagram, Facebook,
Yes.
Twitter, all things
Yes.
that have live video.
Yes, exactly. There's no reason to be limited to one platform. Like today, we're going on 3 or 4 platforms simultaneously. It doesn't make any difference. The other thing, Ed, to bear in mind is that in the world of broadcast, the show was on from 8 until 8:30 and then it was over. Here, everything you create gets archived. And so the more things you make, the more powerful and richer your channel becomes, because essentially it's non-linear and you save it. You become like a mini Netflix. So without a doubt, Periscope is great, but I don't think there's that many people on it anymore. While you're on Periscope, also be on Facebook, be on Instagram, and use social media when you're not broadcasting or webcasting to drive people. I would build my own website personally, like we've done at thevj.com.
Yes.
Be sure to check it out. Take a membership, wouldn't hurt. And at the same time, you can then put those archives there, and each video that you add to it makes the power and the richness and the attraction of your website even greater, and it never goes away. This is really the long tail in play.
We have a whole course on thevj.com about different live streaming platforms
Yes,
and how
we
to
do.
do it. So you can check.
Brett over here says we have a whole course on thevj.com. Go check it out on how to use all different platforms simultaneously.
We're still waiting for some more questions to come in, but we
Oh.
got some time to keep going. Seems like people are still enjoying it.
Okay, no question. Well, Lisa said don't go more than 20 minutes, so I don't like to upset her.
We're on 19.
We're at 19 minutes now, and Lisa, I never do anything that you tell me not to do.
Well, they
So-
can let us know if they enjoy this. If
There
they
we
want
are.
us to do this again.
Yes, well, I think we're doing it again next. Are we moving this to Thursdays?
Thursdays.
Thursdays. Next Thursday, come back. We'll have another interesting topic and open to your questions. And if you have things that you want to talk about in the meantime, you can always reach us at contact@thevj.com. Send us any questions. We answer them right away online. Thanks for joining us here. And if you didn't catch us live, I hope you'll watch this, because we're going to be posting this on all our various websites, just like we talked about. So talk to you later.